What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and I hope you're all doing well today. While this video isn't going to be technically a rogue-specific topic, it is a topic that affects a lot of damage dealers and healers, basically anybody that uses damage over time and healing over time, and sometimes classes that don't even have those. So with Assassination gaining a lot of popularity recently, I figured this would be a good game system to explain in a sort of informational guide type video for it. Pandemic refreshing. So thank you so much for joining me today. Now let's see exactly what that term means and how it affects your damage and healing output too. This video will be segmented out into individual timestamps, so you can skim through or refresh yourself later as needed. If you have any further questions, then feel free to ask in a comment below or swing by my community Discord. The link for that will be in the description of this video. And also, before I get started, I just want to say hello and thank you so much to the two newest patrons of the channel, Sludgebomb and Iborn. Thank you both so much for your support, seriously. I'll do my best to keep bringing out as much helpful information as I'm able to. So, pandemic refreshing is a concept that quite a lot of players might be aware of, but they might not know exactly how it works, and some classes rely on this pretty heavily. Primarily, this is crucial for dot classes, whether they be ranged or melee oriented. Originally, this was a warlock ability, hence the somewhat unorthodox name in the current state of things. This ability had been changed dramatically numerous times between Wrath of the Lich King and Mists of Pandaria, but the final iteration that was used during Mists of Pandaria was the inspiration for this somewhat hidden game-wide mechanic, which resulted in the warlock-specific feature being removed with the launch of Warlords of Draenor. In the current iteration of WoW with Shadowlands, a pandemic refresh is when you recast a damage over time or healing over time effect, and a portion of the remaining dot or HOTS time will be added to the new version. To be exact, up to 30% of the duration can be added on top of the new cast. This gets a little bit more complicated for classes that use combo points, but I will go over that in a bit too, don't worry. So, using my Assassination Rogue as an example, we can test exactly how this works. This will apply to virtually every damage over time ability, as well as some player buffs as well, which I'll go over too. For our first example, we'll be looking at the Garrote combo point generator. For those who don't play Rogue or Assassination, this is a damage over time bleed effect that lasts for 18 seconds with a 6-second cooldown. So to get the greatest amount of effective use out of this dot, and to get more uptime of it, we want to make sure that once there is only 30% left of this debuff that we refresh it. This example becomes a bit more convoluted for my sneaky boys and girls out there due to the Subterfuge talent, which is an Assassination Rogue specific thing that empowers your Garrotes if used from stealth, making them deal more damage. With those, you never want to refresh an empowered Garrote basically ever unless you can vanish and refresh with an empowered one from stealth anyways. For the case of this video, we're just going to talk about a regular Garrote that can't be empowered by Subterfuge. So 30% of 18 seconds, the base duration of Garrote, is 5.4 seconds. Which, if you're just using the standard UI for debuff tracking, this becomes a bit tricky to pinpoint exactly when is the ideal time to refresh it, because it only goes in single digits, not down into decimals. That's why I highly recommend some form of an add-on, whether it be a nameplate system like Plater or KUI nameplates, or a weak or a debuff tracker like the ones I made for myself or the plenty of other ones that are out there. Basically something that glows or warns you when you're within pandemic refresh range is ideal, but eventually, if you're comfortable with the class, you'll probably be able to remember them off the top of your head pretty easily. Since I switch between specs a lot, it definitely helps to have a visual indicator for refresh timers, and that applies to basically anyone with a damage over time effect. I really recommend having something. Again, for combo point effects, these rules are kinda different, but I will be explaining that in the next section, buff refreshing. This is where the rules don't seem incredibly consistent. For healing over time effects, this is a pretty common thing, such as like regrowth for druids and renew for priests. For rogue examples, some things that can be affected by refreshing within that 30% duration that I mentioned are Slice and Dice and Roll the Bones, while some other abilities aren't affected by it at all. This is where a bit of personal testing might be necessary, as there are so many different classes and specs and buffs to consider when finding out which ones can benefit from refreshing early or not. For combo point spending classes, like Feral Druid and all 3 specs of Rogue, your combo point finishers work a bit differently with pandemic refreshing if they're a dot. The way it works is based off the amount of combo points spent on the new reapplication. So it doesn't matter if, for example, you only spent 3 combo points on the first Slice and Dice, you can refresh it with a 5 or 6 combo point Slice and Dice for the full effect of 30%. This is kinda hard to explain without seeing it, so here's an example. I have a Slice and Dice I will apply with only 2 combo points, which is only an 18-second Slice and Dice. Now, if I were to apply a 5 combo point Slice and Dice right after, it'll basically compare how much time is left on the original Slice and Dice, and it will give me up to 30% of the duration of the new one that I'm applying. A 5 combo point Slice and Dice lasts 36 seconds, so as long as the currently active Slice and Dice buff has 10.8 seconds or more, I will get the full maximum benefit of my refreshed version, resulting in a little over a 46-second Slice and Dice. However, this is why it's also important to refresh with full combo points whenever possible, because if I were to refresh with only 4 combo points, then I'd only be able to carry over 9 seconds into my new Slice and Dice from the currently active buff. These same rules apply with bleed finishers, like Rupture and Crimson Tempest for rogues and Rip for feral druids. Also, as a heads up, the Primal Wrath talent will also overwrite all of your current rips out, and it has its own duration version of the Rip bleed attached to it. So that's something to keep in mind as well, since even though they're technically the same move, when you apply it with Primal Wrath versus directly applying it with Rip, they are different durations, so you will only benefit from a certain portion of the Pandemic Refresh. As I try to reiterate throughout this video, the Pandemic Refresh system affects all aspects of the game, and in different ways, so even if you don't have a heal over time or damage over time ability, you might have a buff that gets affected by this refresh system, so I feel this is really pertinent information for basically any player to know about and see how it interacts with your class or spec. And being that Assassination, for us sneaky boys and girls, is a very heavily predominant with bleeds and damage over time effects, this is something really important to know as it'll help smooth out your rotation and help you get a little extra damage too. So I hope this information is helpful to you. And if so, please consider leaving a like, a comment, or maybe even subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. It's all tremendously appreciated and helps a lot with the channel's growth. And as always, my gratitude to you, my viewers, commenters, subscribers, and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.